Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's a thrill to have you all out here. There's a lot of you out there. I can't tell you how much it means to have people from around the world, local as well, to be here to support Tron. It means a lot to us. I obviously can't stand here doing that the whole time. I'll try and find a position where I can see you. Just curious, how many people felt their very first earthquake this morning? Yeah, quite exciting, isn't it? It's pretty thrilling. I also want to say that, as I think probably all of you know, we were acquired about 7 months ago by Tron, so I'm with the BitTorrent division. It's an honor to be here with people who have been investing and thinking about crypto and blockchain all this time. I'm relatively new. So it's great to be with you all here. As part of being new to this industry, I had my first chance about a few weeks ago to go to London to be at a conference with people like you and sit there and talk to people about what this all meant. And I asked them a few questions. So I walked around into the participants and I said, why are we really here? What is this whole blockchain crypto thing about? What is the future of this stuff? Is this truly disruptive? Or, like some people are saying, this is just a blip. This is going to go away. You can see it fading. And what's your favorite idea? What's your vision of the future? And I had some great conversations. These were with people who were more novice, all the way to people who were running the blockchain or crypto part for their company. The answers I got were really interesting. The most common answer was, you know what? I don't know what it's going to be. And we'll see. And we just need to keep going. So if you're a skeptic of this space, and let's be honest, there's many, these kind of answers wouldn't be very satisfying. And let's be honest, there are some bad players in this space. During the upflow, the upswing, where everyone was investing, and there was a lot of exuberance, irrational exuberance in the space, and a lot of people made money, some people ran away with the money, some people lost money. So there is reason for skeptics to be out there, and for people to lampoon this entire space. So it reminded me of a book I read by Dave McCullough about the Wright brothers at the turn of the 20th century. I don't know if anyone has read that book or knows much about this, but at that time in aviation history, before anyone had successfully flown yet, there were people out there trying to figure out how they could fly like a bird. And maybe you've seen, and I have these images of these ridiculous patents on these flying machines, like this guy with a bicycle with propellers in the air, and as he pedals, it brings him up like a helicopter. Just absurd and ridiculous inventions. And then the Wright brothers made it work. They tried and tried and tried and did experiments and tests and figured out the mathematics behind flight. And this is, pictured here is the Wright Flyer. This was the first ever motor-powered flight. Now, the part I didn't know, and the part that I got from this book, is the people who were critics, the people who thought this was just ridiculous flight of fancy, who were lampooning this whole thing and thought these people were ridiculous daredevils. Even after this flight took place, there were still people who thought, well, what is this thing, what does it even mean? What is this airplane going to do for us? By the way, that included the US government, who was barely interested in this thing at all. It also included the US military. It took a while for this to catch on. So you can see, even with something as concrete that's right in front of us as an airplane, it's a new technology and people wonder what this can do. As we know, this shrunk the world. This brought people together in ways that they could never do before. This shrunk time, and it's now a $700 billion profit industry every year. There's also, much closer in time, the internet. And you all know, some of you lived through that, I did. And there were skeptics, and people were throwing money at this thing and wondering, what is this thing going to be? And there was a lot of lampooning. There was a lot to make fun of. But through all of this, we got what we have today. So it made me think, you know what, we're actually right where we should be. This is how things like crypto and blockchain take off, is that there's investment and exuberance and excitement, and it doesn't always go perfectly. And yes, there's stuff to lampoon, but good stuff, bold stuff can come out of that. Now, at this conference, there were some themes that came out about, again, what is blockchain? What is the future? What is our vision here? Control of information is certainly a theme that's been talked about today already. Proof of a transaction, nearly indelible proof that something happened that's inarguable. From these things, automation and efficiency, and free and people-powered things. The Economist calls blockchain the trust machine, a shared trusted public ledger that everyone can inspect, but which no single user controls. The participants collectively keep the ledger up to date. It can be amended only according to strict rules and by general agreement. So it's easy to see trust and think, oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Trust is great. Trust is a civilization-defining feature. This is a difference, one of the elements between successful and unsuccessful civilizations. If you don't have trust at a big level, then the only people you can trust are those immediately around you, your family, your tribe. And this is tribalism, and you cannot grow big things with lack of trust. So just that alone for the blockchain is huge. And I'll talk about an example of that in a second. I asked people, again, what are your favorite visions for the future in this space? One person imagined just the freedom to travel around the world in their pocket, so to speak, with their secured identity, their reputation, their ability to purchase, so they can go anywhere, and this information can be used to unlock products, services, doctors, all of that. Another person talked about making the world more fair and just. This is where a real estate transaction, a land transaction, any type of transaction between or among people is recorded in proof of that transaction. And this gets back to the example I gave earlier. So there are parts of this world, and we take it for granted here, but there's parts of the world where, as the Economist pointed out, someone can buy a piece of land. They can spend their life savings on a piece of land or a house. And then because records are so poor, and in some of these countries there's maybe 20, 30% of records that are kept, someone can come in and just steal that from you. And there's no recourse because no one can prove it. So that is indeed huge. So to Tron, this, everything I mentioned and more is the future. We are believers in this, as I know most of you are. We are the ones, a handful of us here and more around the world. Well, we're at a powerful place. This is a brand new technology. Again, there are skeptics out there, but it's all of us and others like us who are going to move this forward. As with the things I went through, the airplanes and internet, we've got to start somewhere. This is where Tron is starting with BitTorrent. Now, I'm going to take you back in time to 2013. By the way, this is the year that the word selfie was entered in the dictionary. You guys were watching the Harlem Shake video. You were playing Candy Crush, the #1 game at that time. BitTorrent, meanwhile, released BitTorrent bundles. Now, this was a way to get artists and content creators together with fans so they could form a direct relationship and exchange value. The fact that BitTorrent was even doing this, to some who didn't know us, was like, really, BitTorrent is trying to make it so that people can exchange value directly? It was surprising to some. It really shouldn't have been surprising. This has been in our blood for a long time, really since the beginning of bringing these people together without middlemen, without people blocking that. We've actually been one of the biggest content licensees from Hollywood in existence. The purpose behind this, the vision behind this, as our then Chief Content Officer Matt Mason put it, is options, not rules. This was the idea that as an artist, as a producer, as a filmmaker, whatever, that you could bring your merchandise, bring your art to your fans directly under your own rules. So typically, it's not unusual for you to have to give up the rights to your content in order to get it out to people. It's very unusual for you to be able to go to any geo that you want in the world and reach fans everywhere. There's often restrictions, as I think we all know. Artists could also put anything into a bundle. Maybe it's just one song. Maybe it's a whole album. Maybe it's an album and a video. Maybe it's a piece of art. But they could do with this bundle whatever they wanted. They could also charge whatever they wanted. For some, like new artists, just having a bunch of emails is all they wanted. Others could say, you can pay what you want, or they'd have a fixed price. The reception of this was incredible. We had hundreds of millions of downloads of this licensed content. We had participation from Tom York of Radiohead, from Madonna, from Lady Gaga, from Cascade, from Tim Ferriss. All kinds of genres entering into this and producing this content. And this lit a fuse under us. This was a dramatic success, but more than that, it was a proof point that people want this kind of solution. People are looking for this kind of solution. This bringing together of people, this is what BitTorrent has always been about. So when Bram Cohen started BitTorrent back in, I believe, 2004, his whole idea was, how do we make the transfer of files and content more efficient? So that you can do it regardless of where you are in the world, no geography limits. You can exchange content even if your internet service is horrible, even if the resiliency, your network's bouncing up and down, and even if there's gatekeepers, you can still get the content you want. So this is well within what's in our hearts as BitTorrent. And fortunately, it's also what Justin Sun and Tron are looking to do for the world. We believe creators and consumers should be able to freely connect beyond geotechnical and political barriers, respecting artists, fans, and yes, even middlemen, and with traditional Western values of free speech and access. On this last point, we live in interesting times. So, some of you may know that Facebook, Google, and Twitter, when they entered on the scene, they created these experiences of content consumption, of ideas and art. And they operated much like a phone company did. All they're doing is laying pipes and allowing information to travel through those pipes. But today, they're being asked, and they're voluntarily doing, censorship of what's going through those pipes. And it is a very hard job. And I don't mean to minimize that at all, but we're in a situation where we are going from pipes to censorship. Meanwhile, fake news is something that probably everyone around the world is thinking about now. A guy called Eric Weinstein, who's a Harvard economist and mathematician, dubbed four types of fake news. There's algorithmic, which means that when you're using Google search, when you're using Facebook, whatever it is, that they are going to decide, based on some tuned algorithm, what you see and what you don't see. Another is narrative-driven. This is where even our most trusted publications, on either side of the spectrum, from the New York Times to the New York Post, Washington Post, Fox News, they develop a narrative and say, here's what we want to do over the next 6 months, and then they find the news that fits that narrative. And this is creating isolated rooms of thought for different groups, and we don't talk to each other. Another one is institutional. These trusted institutions, like a university or a scientific organization, puts out stuff, puts out studies, and we kind of blindly trust it. When I see Stanford University, I'm like, oh, they know what they're talking about, but they're human too. And it's not always what we think. And then, of course, there's just plain old traditional lying. Through all these things and more, there are voices and values that are falling through the cracks. This is something that we, as BitTorrent and Tron, are concerned about. Traditional Western values say that we can't let this happen, that we have a deep distrust of anybody at the helm of what we can and can't see. A great example of this, and something that I can't put into better words, Frederick Douglass, at a time in our country's history in the United States, a shameful period in the world and in this country, he was an escaped slave, as you know, and he was participating in Boston in an abolitionist movement, an abolitionist speech, and people from the community came and broke it up and said, no, you're not going to be able to speak, and no one's going to be able to hear you. So later, in 1860, he gave a speech, a plea for free speech in Boston, and he articulated well what as a country we weren't always doing well, and not at this time especially. and said no right was deemed by the fathers of the government more sacred than the right of speech. And equally clear is the right to hear. So to suppress free speech both shuts me up and prevents you all from listening, for every one of us. Now, we distrust this so much in America that even ideas that we find abhorrent, even the worst things out there, we would rather have them go freely and exposed to the sunshine than have anybody suppress that speech, because someday it'll get to the speech that we actually believe in. So this brings me to BitTorrent token and BitTorrent and what we're doing here today. BitTorrent token is a powerful thing that endows every BitTorrent user with value. This is a new element to BitTorrent that we haven't had before. This is value that people can exchange with artists, with publishers, with rights holders, with people who produce podcasts. People can make a living in this schema, and people can trade value in this schema like they never have before with BitTorrent. The goal is to build an information and entertainment platform or hub for the distributed internet. This is Justin's vision. This is BitTorrent's vision. This is an open platform. It's live and on demand. Justin talked a little bit about the live platform. In the future, you'll hear more about that. But we at BitTorrent have had already launches of BitTorrent Live, which is a live distribution method that uses a peer-to-peer protocol. It's more efficient. It's cost flat versus a curve versus having to pay for servers for every new subscriber you get or every group of subscribers. It's a remarkable technology, and you'll hear more about how we're applying that in the future. This is options and artists for fans. This is monetization and access for all. So, BitTorrent token, which is coming out in some form later this quarter, is the first blockchain application with this real use case. So we're excited about this just in its own right, that we can do this at scale to so many of the over 100 million users that we have at BitTorrent. Of course, with any new technology, especially something that affects something that people already love. So BitTorrent users are nervous about how this may change BitTorrent. And I want to say this. We have been responsible for this BitTorrent protocol for the last decade. We have made changes to this protocol over that decade. We take very seriously that we need this protocol to continue to serve users in the way they want. We don't want degradation. We don't want to make this a pay-for-play scheme. And the engineers are working very hard to make sure that when we introduce this, we don't degrade that performance of BitTorrent. In addition, I've had direct conversations with Justin's son. When he bought BitTorrent, well, of course, it's understandable that he wants to protect the assets that he got. So he does not want to see the BitTorrent protocol degraded either. We're all in this together to make this new expression of token within BitTorrent and maintain what people love about BitTorrent. As such, there's higher availability of files, so this should be an improvement. There's faster downloads. There is no mining in this application. This is not going to turn your computer into a heater. And it's backward compatible, and of course, if you don't want to use it, it's optional. Justin Knoll will be talking later about the details of the BitTorrent token. He'll go into more technical details. Definitely tune in for that. Again, it's an honor to speak in front of you. Thank you for everybody's attention, and I appreciate it. Take care.